Hey, this is Christian. This is my video synopsis of chapter 1, 2, and 3 in our English textbook. Chapter 1 is about connecting process and principle, kind of technically describing what communication is and how it relates to you and society. Chapter 2, connecting perception and communication, is about how perception affects communication and how we perceive things differently. Chapter 3, Connecting Self and Communication, talks about how we see ourselves and how that affects how we communicate. So Chapter 1 defines communication as the simultaneous sharing and creating of meaning through human symbolic interaction. Pretty obvious, right? We should study communication because it's not a natural skill but a learned skill. We should communicate ethically, not plagiarize, and be honest in our communication. Communication is transactional, involving sender and receiver, also pretty obvious. And communication can be intentional and unintentional. Unintentional communication is mostly non-verbal. The book states effective communication is critical to living successfully in today's society. And I'm sure that was true 100 years ago, even though they didn't have the internet. The components of communications are the source, which in this case is me, the message, composed by the words I'm using, how I say it, my tone of voice, my movements, and so on. It can be repeated several times, but it'll still be a unique message based on your perception of it. For example, if you see a movie for a second time, you might have heard someone comment on it after you saw it the first time, and then the second time you see it, you look at it differently. The message is shaped by interference. That can be background noise, or even psychological, like am I speaking very monotonously? Yeah. Loud voice, soft voice, and so on. You guys are all the receivers, and you translate or encode my message into meaning, hopefully. Feedback is when you let me know what you think about my message. The environment is where I'm sitting right now, and if I hadn't placed my camera so cleverly, you could have probably seen all the mess behind me, and you would notice that the carpet needs steam cleaning and so on, and it's, at least right now, it feels awfully hot in here because I'm kind of nervous. The environment also includes attitudes, feelings, and the relationship between you and me. The context sort of encompasses all of the above, and like I'm communicating to you, my classmates, and this is a synopsis of the chapters in the textbook, and it's pretty informal, and it's done over the internet. So we move on to types of communications. Intrapersonal is you by yourself trying to understand a message. Interpersonal is between people in a relationship, for example, my wife and me. Dyadic is exchange of information, and interview is a question-answer session, and small group communication is in a small group with a common task or goal. Public communication is when one person speaks to a large audience, usually to inform, persuade, or entertain, and it's pretty formal. Mass communication could be public communication, just reaching a huge audience, using mass media like TV or internet or radio, and so on. Social media could be part of that, but it's usually more informal, and you can it can be interpersonal. Social cues as part of a message, available on a video call, and definitely face to face. Not so much in a letter, or God forbid we wrote a letter, or like texting on the phone. The end of the chapter talks about 5 minutes about communications. It's a cure-all, which it's not. You can't really take back what you said. And quantity means quality, obviously not. Meanings is in the word we use. also not true, because there's so much more to it, like the social cues I mentioned. Excuse me. We have a natural ability to communicate. We don't. We have to learn it. And communication is reversible. Also not true. So be careful what you say. So on to chapter 2 then. Connecting perception and communication. Lesson 1. We don't really know what information is shared about us. So be careful what you put out there. The book defines perception as the process of selecting, organizing, and interpreting information to give personal meaning to the information we receive. Keyword: personal meaning. We select to attend to certain things. That's exposure. We focus on what we want to hear, tuning out disturbances, which is selective attention, and we remember more easily things we like or agree with, which is selective retention. Like, did you remember to take out the garbage? Or do you remember that the football game starts at 8 o'clock on ABC? We organize, for example, people into categories. Could be based on age, gender, race, nationality, and so on. Do we know them? How old are they? Then closure is our way of filling out missing information. The more information we notice and base our perception on, the more cognitively complex we are. And we organize based on proximity and similarity. Someone close to us or looking similar, we might assume they like the same things we do if they play on our soccer team or something. The last part is interpretation, assigning meaning to stimuli. The lesson is we all interpret things differently, even though we get the same message. We may perceive things based on other people's opinions, which is kind of fun. We perceive things based on other people's perceptions. And verbal communication is the trickiest to interpret, because there's so many social cues and interferences, I guess. Like, did he just eat garlic? Why does he smell like that? What's that accent? And so forth. Which leads us to perceptual set and stereotyping. Perceptual set is your fixed viewpoint on something, and stereotyping then is your categorization of things based on your perceptual set. Attribution is how we explain behavior based on situation or trait, and we tend to emphasize trait, like someone not doing something because they're lazy, as opposed to figuring out the real reason they didn't do it. Other things affecting how we perceive things are physical characteristics, like how tall you are, our state of mind, cultural background, and of course gender. And lastly, the media, which almost always, without exception, try to influence our perception through ads, be it commercial products, political ads, or just trying to make us watch a certain program. So the lesson is perception influences us, and we can seek information and try to understand that other people have different viewpoints, and be careful and check your perception before you jump to a conclusion. Then on to chapter 3, about connecting self and communications, starting with the question, who's the real me? And you might answer that differently based on how you perceive things, or perceive yourself. Self-concept is described on page 62, an organized collection of beliefs and attitude about self. Made up of self-esteem and self-image. I might say I'm a good daddy because I provide for my kids, but then I might say I'm a bad daddy because I don't play with them enough, because I don't have time, because I do homework all the time. How others communicate to us, for example, our parents or friends, teachers, and so on, affect our development of self-concept. So be careful how you communicate to people, I guess is the lesson here. Attitudes say something about our values, how we think about ourselves, others, and even about objects and ideas. Relate our beliefs, which are not necessarily based on truth. In the book, a small study describes how 4 people actually changed this self-concept of a girl, and oddly enough, it changed their perception of her as well, even though they knew it was a study. So the conclusion is self-concept is based on communication. Like, I act differently around my friends than my family and co-workers. Culture and self-concept kind of relates to describing yourself as a member of a group rather than individually. Groups then can be based on religion, age, gender, and so forth, nationality. The book describes individual versus collective orientation, specifically mentions Americans and Japanese people describing themselves. I know as a Norwegian, back home, we kind of perceive Americans as maybe overly confident or even arrogant, and I always have to correct assumptions people have of Americans when I'm back home, because they're mostly not true. You're all nice people is what I'm trying to say. Gender plays a big role in personal social identity. Men and women, they do differ in how they use their brains, but a lot of it is influence from birth. And these external influences create stereotypes and gender expectations, which appropriately lead us to self-fulfilling prophecy, which is how expectations of ourselves and others lead us to act in predictable ways. Like, if you're a girl, they expect you to play with dolls, and then you play with dolls. The lesson here is to stay positive and believe you have the potential to be successful, because you do. The chapter ends with impression management and tips on enhancing self-concept. Impression management is basically selling yourself, which is really important for example, a politician and our teacher and a leader of a big company, a CEO or something. The list goes as follows. Decide what you want to change. Describe why you feel the way you do. Make a commitment to change and set a reasonable goal, and specifically decide what you want to do. And lastly, try to surround yourself with positive people, which can be tricky because you can't always choose who you surround yourself with. And that ends the chapter. I wish everyone good luck, and I'll see you later.